Okay, welcome to the fourth act of our 8-act play going into tomorrow. This is the Build Northwest Council Trade and Transportation track. It began this morning with supply chains, and then of course you were at the lunch, which was very interesting to figure out these global shipping issues. We're going to continue now and focus on the Cascadia Corridor as a supply chain with an emphasis on trucking and local engagement. And just a couple, put things in context a bit. The Build Northwest Council, the Accelerator Program, is funded by the U.S. Department of Transportation Build America Bureau. And as such, we provide technical assistance to local projects, but we also simultaneously bundle those projects into a multi-state, in some cases binational, in the case of Cascadia Corridor, it is a binational corridor. And we develop strategies for federal investment and for inviting private capital investment and working, and more importantly, not just private investment in capital infrastructure. We talked a lot about that in the second session this morning, but also an understanding, for instance, in this panel, how trucking operates and what are the challenges of operating in this binational and in this panel's case, bi-state environment. And I'm delighted to have my former colleague, Bets Meyer, here to moderate this and kind of set the context. Beth started out a few years ago, I think as an intern, I'm not sure. And then she staffed Senator Winder and my binational transportation working group for many years. And then when we got our first grant back in 2021, we looked around for somebody to be the deputy director, because while I'm the director, I don't do day-to-day management well, as my staff will tell me. And lo and behold, we had the talent right there in the office. So we elevated her to this position, and boy, did she take off. She handled a very difficult situation when CalSTART, which is a major nonprofit organization in California, really does all the clean energy work in the U.S., contacted me and said, we've got this contract with the Washington State Joint Transportation Committee to develop in like 5 months an incentive plan for using some of Washington State's climate action funds to incentivize the conversion of commercial vehicles to zero emissions. So Betts took that job on and conducted with Sherry Call up here and other folks in the industry. We reached out, I think it was 24 one-on-ones. We talked to logistics companies. We talked to trucking firms in Spokane and Vancouver, Washington about the challenges of conversion. We talked to utilities. We talked about permitting. And in the process of that 6 months, Betts became a subject matter expert to the point that CalSTART stole her from me. And so she went to work for CalSTART, handling the Washington State Incentive Program, which you'll talk about. So when we were putting this summit together, the first thought I had was, we got to bring her back into the family and tell us how you're doing with the plan that you developed and now you're implementing it. So I'm going to turn it over to Betts to introduce the panel and the topic. And then we do have another session this afternoon, economic corridors, and then a very interesting session on existing Cascadia Rail, BNSF operations, and the future of high-speed rail. So, Betts?
Well, thanks for that introduction, Bruce. It's really good to be back. I realized on the drive over that this is the first July in a very long time I've had kind of to myself, and so as much as I've missed being part of Pinwar, and I miss all my Pinwar colleagues dearly, I have enjoyed a very relaxing summer, relatively speaking. So, hi everyone, my name is Bets Meyer. I currently serve as Deputy Director of Washington Incentive Programs for CalSTART. A question I get a lot now is, how do you like living in California? And my answer is that I don't. CalSTART is a nonprofit that is based in California, however. We have offices across the US, and we focus a lot on policies and programs that accelerate the transition to low and no emission transportation. CalSTART conducts industry research, and we administer several programs. We were selected earlier in the year by WashDOT as the third-party administrator for a program that we are calling WAZIP. This is Washington's Zero Emission Incentive Program for medium and heavy-duty vehicles and off-road equipment. I'll speak about that a little bit more later. I'm joined today by 3 expert panelists. We have Wilf Pinfold from Open Commons, which is near Portland, Oregon. We have Sherry Call, President and CEO of Washington Trucking Association, and Dave Earle, President of the BC Trucking Association. So we have a nice sort of like tri-state and provincial spread here. So they'll introduce themselves and their work in just a few minutes, but for now, I wanted to talk a little bit more about what systems integration is and why it matters. This is a concept I've seen Bruce incubate over the past few years, and I think it gets at something really important when we think about the future of our transportation systems, our supply chains, and our regional economies. Innovation is the foundation of economic growth, and the Pacific Northwest is no stranger to innovation, especially in the transportation space. But innovation is risky, and innovation requires investment. And when we're looking at innovation for an entire sector, that innovation requires a lot of coordination. And coordination can be difficult if you have multiple industries and sectors that historically have been insulated from one another. This is especially true of transportation and energy sectors. As Bruce likes to say, they go to different conferences, they speak different languages, they have different planning processes. And when we're looking at the development and the acceleration of adoption for zero-emission vehicles, especially in the medium and heavy-duty sector, where these trucks, these buses, they require a lot more energy and a lot more infrastructure than even a Tesla would. So in that situation, with EV adoption on the rise, not just in North America, but globally, we need to have ways to coordinate and collaborate. So I think this is one of those really great ways that we can do that, is by looking at the whole system of transportation, who is now looking at the energy sector as a key piece of them unlocking this innovation, and the energy sector who can now look at transportation as a large and growing customer base for them. So when we're looking at this confluence of innovation, investment, and risk, public sector dollars have been absolutely essential in providing investment and reducing risk in ways that allows innovation to grow. So public sector regulations and rules, on the other side, also help push the conversation forward a little bit by telling the private sector where they want them to go. And I think that there's a bit of like push and pull that we'll probably talk about in today's panel between carrots and sticks, investment and regulation. And when it works really, really well. And honestly, the reality is that a lot of times we have mixed results. And one example of this is in California. So California has a point of sale voucher incentive program, HVIP, that has helped companies purchase low and no emission vehicles for the past 10 years. These newer to market vehicles are more expensive than their diesel counterparts, but they do over time have significant total cost of ownership savings, and they are better for the environment and our communities in the longer term. And California has paired this incentive program with 2 kinds of regulations. One is called Advanced Clean Trucks, ACT, and this is a regulation on manufacturers to help them and push them to sell more zero-emission vehicles over time. They have paired that with what's called Advanced Clean Fleets, which is a regulation on fleets to push them to have more ZEVs in their fleets over time as well, with sort of the idea that between these 3 things, they'll sort of eventually hit a point where we can push innovation and market adoption to a spot where the total cost of ownership for zero-emission vehicles is at cost parity with diesel, and it'll kind of take off on its own. For reference, Washington is an advanced clean truck state, so this is the regulation on manufacturers. I believe Oregon is also an ACT state as well. Neither of them have adopted advanced clean trucks Advanced Clean Fleets, which again is the regulation that puts pressure on the fleets to adopt. So this combination of carrots and sticks in California has helped push truck manufacturers to develop and deploy battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell trucks, delivery vans, school buses, things like that. And currently, California is the #1 state in the US for zero-emission, medium and heavy-duty vehicle deployments and adoption. So we do see that this is working. However, Congress and the executive branch recently revoked California's ability to set these stronger emission standards for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. This is an authority that California has maintained since the Reagan administration. So this issue is obviously making its way through the courts now, and will have some implications both for California's future in zero emission and Washington's future in zero emission, because Washington is following ACT. But while we are potentially losing this stick, that makes the carrots more important than ever. And this comes back to WASIP. So the Washington State Legislature has generously invested over $125 million in a zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicle and off-road equipment point-of-sale voucher incentive program. This initiative, WASIP, is funded through Washington's Climate Commitment Act, which is Washington's Cap and Invest program. So CalSTAR is incredibly excited to be working on WASIP and WashDOT to make this program move forward. This program is going to help Washington companies purchase zero-emission, medium and heavy-duty vehicles and off-road equipment by reducing that point-of-sale purchase price. So like when they look at their invoice, it'll basically have the cost minus the voucher amount, and the purchaser only pays what's left. But we know that money isn't enough. And so WASIP is also really focused on providing technical assistance to fleets, which will be given in coordination with our local partners, WSU Energy, Climate Solutions, Breaking Barriers Collaborative, Clean Prosperous Washington, the Seattle Latino Chamber of Commerce, and Energy Infrastructure Partners. And this is where it circles back around to systems integration. As we're developing and designing and launching WASIP's technical assistance program, we're prioritizing ways to ensure these fleets are working closely with their utilities and developing programs that allow for the easy flow of conversation and planning between WASIP fleets and their utilities, because our goal here is to fund and launch successful deployment projects. So another question I get asked a lot is how WASIP is impacted by these recent federal funding challenges and changes in guidance. And when we're looking strictly at WASIP, which is, again, generously funded by the state legislature with state-sourced CCA funds, the short answer is that we aren't. But some of the federal programs that were previously that supported zero-emission vehicles, including the 45W tax credit, has recently been rescinded and rolled back by Congress. So that obviously does make an impact. But when we take a step back and we look at federal funding as a whole, and we look at our system as a whole, these federal funding cutbacks are impacting infrastructure development for both EV charging infrastructure and hydrogen refueling infrastructure. Even just having these pauses between, having secured funding and whether or not this will be rolled back does result in delays and uncertainty, which makes things tricky for investors. Some good news, though, is that WashDOT and the state of Washington have secured $55 million of NEVI funding, National EV Infrastructure funding, and they will be starting to announce the programs that will fund in fall 2025. So it's a sort of interesting time, I think, which we can all attest to. But many of the other infrastructure investments secured by other entities, including the Northwest Seaport Alliance, have been paused and may be lost. So this is a time of uncertainty where the OEMs have invested billions of dollars in developing these new technologies. We have a need for infrastructure investment, not just for zero-emission vehicles, but also for the resiliency of our energy infrastructure as a whole. And we also see this as an opportunity for further innovation. So with all that in mind, I'm really excited to be here today to talk to these three folks about what the future of our region can be and how we can coordinate so that we are making the right investments in the right places to really move the needle and to allow companies that want to try this new technology and make sure that they're well supported in doing so. So I think, Will, if you have some slides, and I have a slide ticker for you.
Are they teed up next? Yeah, let's see if they work. Yeah, good. So my name is Wolf Pinfold. Run a nonprofit called Open Commons. And we've been working over the, I think 15 years now, since we started working with the National Institute of Standards and Technology on a program that they call Global Community Technology Consortium. It's changed its name a little bit, kept the same acronym, but and that program is really focused around how do we use technology to improve communities more broadly than transportation, energy, all the utilities, data, public safety. So we've been working with the National Institute of Standards to catalog all of the programs that they're aware of, not only across our region, but across the whole country, and quite a few international programs. In fact, part of the reason I got involved, I was still working at Intel at the time, and we had large efforts going on in smart city technology in both Asia and Europe, and very little going on here. So that was the original push for us to take action. And that was about 15 years ago. I left Intel about 5 years ago and started Open Commons, and we took over the cataloging of that information. In other words, NIST was looking to outsource that work. We picked it up and we built a catalog. You can go and see it anytime you want, opencommons.org. A lot of projects there in all of these different areas. But having worked on these projects for a considerable amount of time, we started to realize we need to actually do something here. We're cataloging all this stuff. Let's get down to business and see if we can change a district. And what we characterize from most of these projects is they're sort of bit projects. They do some really interesting things, but they're focused in one area or another. And we were really interested in the logistics hub, an area that could benefit hugely from a variety of technologies, and could see not only economic uplift in an area, but could also see social uplift in an area. So we were looking around for a district that would work on, and a district that we knew well, because you can't do this without a lot of personal contact and engagement. And so we chose an area that is, let's see if I got it, right along the Columbia River. Some of you, if you know the I-5 and the 205, will know this area because it's a major part of the corridor that comes down from Seattle to California. And this area is the Multnomah County Drainage District. It's a part of the coast, the edge of the Columbia River. It's a floodplain, and so it's called the Multnomah County Drainage District because it has 4 districts that each have funding, tax funding for levies in those areas. And it is a logistics hub in itself, I think by accident rather than planning. But the Portland Airport is there, and there's where the Columbia River, where the I-5 crosses, is an old bridge that's had a lot of planning done for it to be replaced. The 205 bridge is a much newer bridge, and the area between them is heavy diesel use. So just about everything you can imagine as far as diesel, heavy trucks, light trucks, is along that area. So over the next 30 years, there's going to be huge change there. We can't predict exactly what it's going to be, but clearly there's going to be fuel changes there, and it's going to change that district quite substantially. So I thought I'd pick out a few things that are along there. There's a lot of different things, but I wanted to highlight a few. We just spent $2.15 billion on a new airport there. Beautiful piece of work, very community-oriented in the sense that it was all done with timber, and all that timber came from within 50 miles of the airport, and a large amount of it came from Native American lands. And it's a beautiful airport. I think it's probably one of the most attractive airports in the country. And that area that I've shaded slightly white is basically the airport area. So you can see where it is right between those 2 highways. The next thing I wanted to highlight, we're about to spend about $300 million turning the Portland Expo into a premier sports destination. Not so much to do with travel, but right there on the right-hand side of the bridge crossing that's coming over on the I-5. The next one I wanted to highlight, it's very hard to see, but if I flick back and forth, you can see the white spot just on the left-hand side coming down the highway. The Jubit's Truck Stop, which is a nationally recognized travel center for trucks with a large number of amenities. There's places to stay, theaters to see, food to go to, and that is clearly going to have an opportunity to bring in alternative fuels and alternative service infrastructure. Let's see, what was the next one? The next one, that area, again, I'll flick back and forth so you can see it right across the road from the Jubit's Truck Stop is the major Amazon distribution center for the city of Portland, heavily moving to electric delivery. Most of the trucks we see on the road now are these Rivians delivering in the area. Let's see, one more. Yeah, really hard to see. Right over on the far right-hand side, my right-hand side, your left, is the, flick back and forth. Whoops, it's really hard to see it. Is the Daimler Truck facility in Oregon, and they have what you're looking at there in that photograph is a 1 megawatt capable charging facility for heavy trucks, and they have a pretty. This is where most of the electric truck work is going on for Daimler trucks. So that gives you some idea of the various pieces here. The reason we got involved in it is that there is huge opportunity for looking ahead to try and help the community think about what they want to do strategically. That's not happening at the moment. All of these investments are separate investments. They're not really done with the engagement of the community as a community. But all of these entities are community-oriented. They would like to do something with the community. They're all making huge investments, and they don't want pushback from the community. So the idea of getting the community thinking ahead, developing their own strategic plan, and effectively approaching these organizations, and this is just a handful. I mean, FedEx has a major distribution facility here. This is, major truck companies other than Daimler up here. So the opportunity to get the community to start to think ahead and come up with a plan that is more proactive, that they can go to these businesses and say, hey, look, if you're going to put this facility in here, then work with us. And what you see for most of the residential stuff, this is, I'll talk about the bridge in a second, but what you see for most of the residential property here, this is just as you cross the bridge. On the left-hand side of the bridge is a trailer park, and a lot of the facilities up here are trailer parks or mobile homes of one sort or another. And it's right across the street from the Amazon facility, and that's a 4-lane highway with no crossings on it. And you can be pretty sure that a lot of people who live in that trailer park are working in Amazon. So the opportunity for Amazon to actually think more community-oriented and to help with some of these transitions and help people is significant if they know that that's what the community is pushing for. If they know that these investments are going to get support and it's going to help them with their engagement with the community. So the last piece of this is still in a great deal of flux, but that bridge, and I wish I'd zoomed in a little bit further to it because you can see it's a 120-year-old bridge, it has been planned now for about the last 40 years as a major project for updating that bridge structure. And the estimates, I put a couple of estimates up there. The last estimate I heard from discussions with some of the experts working on this is probably closer to $9 billion bridge construction. So it's not like the area doesn't have considerable investment going in. It's going to bring a lot of activity. And if that can be used to help engage the community and turn it into something more like a coherent logistics hub where all these parts can work together and we can move the fuel over to something more renewable, I think that'd be tremendous. So that's really our objective, is to try and bring these together. One more connection. So you can see right below the airport is this area called Cully. Cully is it's one of the most diverse communities in the area, and it happens to be actually quite well organized. A lot of these communities are not particularly well organized, but Cully is. They have 4 nonprofits that coordinate an organization called Living Cully. And they have arranged with Prosper Portland, our sort of quasi-government organization that helps with economic development in the region, to set up a TIF district there, a tax incremental funding district there, which over the next 30 years will produce $350 million. Now, $350 million, considering what has to happen there, is not a great deal of money, but it could be a trigger for a whole lot of investments and get some really interesting things to happen in the area. So we're working with Living Cully right now to come up with a plan, a strategic plan for where this could all go. They're excited about it. We're excited about it, and we'd like to see that spread beyond Cully into the whole neighborhood and come up with a solid way in which these investments can not only be good for the businesses making the investments, but can create real uplift for the district. So happy to answer questions after we've gone through the cycle here. Or you want to take that one?
Excellent. Thanks so much. Sherry? No, not at all.
Do you have slides?
Do you mind? Can I use yours? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sherry Call. I'm President and CEO of the Washington Trucking Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I want to take a few minutes to provide an overview of the current state of the trucking industry in Washington State. We are a vital sector that fuels our economy, supports jobs, and connects our communities to the broader global marketplace. Washington's trucking industry is a cornerstone of our state's economy and central to the American way of life. As one of the most trade-dependent states in the U.S., the industry supplies 1 in 18 jobs in Washington. That's over 170,000 trucking jobs statewide, supporting industries from agriculture and manufacturing to retail and technology. The industry is uniquely diverse, ranging from small local carriers to large logistics firms operating across North America. While 96% of companies in Washington operate fewer than 10 trucks, trucking remains the glue that holds the U.S. supply chain together, with over 80% of communities in Washington relying solely on trucks to deliver their goods. Trucks move over 11 billion tons of freight annually nationwide and are responsible for transporting nearly 70% of the nation's total freight. Our ports, in particular, the Port of Seattle and Port of Tacoma, are considered the busiest in the nation during the peak times, serving as crucial gateways for imports and exports, especially to and from Canada and Asia. The past year has been challenging for the trucking industry as it recovers from a lengthy freight recession characterized by low freight volumes, depressed rates, and rising operational costs. Adding to these complexities is the current uncertainty surrounding the tariff and trade policies. Tariffs, especially those related to the steel, aluminum, and other materials, have increased costs for carriers and shippers. Tariffs threaten to increase equipment prices and reduce freight demand for the trucking industry, leading to less business at higher costs. Fluctuations in trade policies can disrupt supply chains, causing delays and unpredictability in freight flows. Washington's economy heavily depends on international trade, so maintaining stability and clarity in these policies is essential for our industry's health. Historically, the industry experienced steady growth driven by strong demand, e-commerce, and international trade. Yet challenges like driver shortages and rising costs have been a constant factor plaguing the industry. Despite continual headwinds, the trucking industry remains optimistic. Resilience and adaptability are cornerstone values of the trucking sector. On the policy front, trucking faces a complex array of state and federal regulations. We face challenges with maintaining sustainable infrastructure funding, size and weight issues with heavier electric vehicles, and support at the national level congruent with the state's carbon reduction goals. At the federal level, most recently, there are ongoing discussions around enforcement of English language proficiency among drivers. This, along with immigration reform, has our members concerned about the driver workforce and sustained output by the agricultural sector. Fewer workers and the loss of drivers also threaten freight volumes and trucking capacity, further deepening the recession. Statewide, Washington has been at the forefront of environmental initiatives pushing for cleaner transportation. This push towards zero-emission commercial transport is gaining momentum in the industry, but we have a long road ahead of us. As part of the state's carbon reduction goals, there's increasing pressure on the industry to adopt cleaner trucks, particularly transitioning to electric and alternative fueled vehicles. While these innovations promise long-term environmental benefits, they also pose significant challenges. High capital costs, infrastructure needs, and the lack of technological maturity have led to skepticism among fleet buyers. We are in the noisy period of innovation as far as the industry is concerned. Transitioning our fleets will require collaboration between government, industry, and community stakeholders to ensure it is efficient and equitable. Finally, trade relations between the U.S. and Canada are especially critical for Washington. Canada is one of our top trading partners, and cross-border trucking is vital for industries on both sides. Trucking in the U.S. moves 67% of surface-traded goods with Canada. We have enjoyed a collaborative relationship with the BC Trucking Association, with Dave Earle heading the organization. Cooperation during COVID between our two associations was critical to keep industry informed and moving. We appreciate this relationship, and I'm pleased to be a co-presenter with Dave today. In summary, Washington's trucking industry is a resilient, essential part of our economy, facing a landscape of opportunities and challenges. As we push toward cleaner transportation, navigate policy changes, and adapt to international trade dynamics, collaboration and innovation will be key. I look forward to engaging with all of you during today's discussion and working together to ensure a sustainable, competitive future for trucking in Washington State. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sherry. All right, Dave, you're running us out.
Am I live? I'm writing this out. Oh, you gave me the last word. I'm so excited. Thank you, everybody. My name is Dave Earle, president of the BC Trucking Association. I do want to share with you, I've talked to Sherry many times over my tenure at BCTA. I'm not a trucking person. I joined the association 7 years ago. First time we've met in person. This is through COVID, floods, disasters, and I got to say, the cooperation that we have from Washington State and our American counterparts is key and critical. And I'm really happy to be here. And then just as a note, the signal that we rely on each other for trade. We rely on each other for so much that we do, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to cement that relationship. British Columbia Trucking Association, like Washington, like the industry North America wide, the vast majority of the companies are small, under 10 units. The very big companies are really big. There's not a lot in the middle anymore. So you've got these massive companies that are able to absorb costs, and you've got small companies that can't. But what ends up happening is the big companies end up having their rates come down because the small guys are chasing freight. There's not enough freight, and here we are. I did want to provide a bit of a Canadian overview and explain why systems integration is so important for us when we look in the Cascadia region north-south as opposed to east-west. We share a common geography, but I think what gets missed sometimes is how massive my country is. Vancouver is a city of 3 million people on the Pacific coast, and you can head east on our highway, and you will travel for, well, about 1,000 kilometers, so about 650 miles before you hit another city of 1 million people. And then after that, you can drive for about 2,500 kilometers before you hit another one. The distances are vast, and when you saw the presentation yesterday about where the population lives, that is that little ribbon. You go north and it just drops off a map. It is truly frontiers. So when we talk about alternate fuels and the limitations and the practical limits of technology, what we've seen is the innovation happens in the Cascadia Corridor, and I'll talk about some of that. From our association's perspective, a key priority, one of our strategic imperatives, is decarbonization of the transportation sector, and that BCTA and our members lead that and participate in that and are very actively engaged in that. We have worked diligently for many years on this. We're a real leader in our country in terms of what this looks like and where we're at. Our members are committed to making this happen. And that's really important to keep in mind as I go through the next 5 minutes and talk about the realities of what we're seeing. I have many members, both private fleets and for-hire fleets, who are running alternate fuel vehicles, specifically battery electric. Hydrogen fuel cell vehicles have been in background testing. They hit the road this fall in British Columbia from a number of manufacturers. And I wanted to share our lessons that we've gone through. Number one is range. Anybody here drive a car, right? You go buy your car, they give you the mileage rating, you drive it for a month and you go, I ain't seeing that. Your mileage may vary. Yeah. Same thing in this world. Manufacturers will state that the vehicles that are running 400 to 450 kilowatt hour batteries, which are 8 times the size of a battery that you would see in a midline Tesla 3, they hold the charge of between 15 and 20 homes daily use. So each time you charge one truck once, that's the equivalent of between 15 and 20 homes running for an entire day. That vehicle will move real world 220 to 250 kilometers, so 150 miles. That's what we see. That's just real world data based on what's happening. What that means is I can't go east-west. We can't look at hubs. There's nowhere to go. I mean, we end up building things in the middle of nowhere. So we look for partnerships and collaborations to go north-south, and that's what we've seen. So we see some remarkable work happening. We've got battery electric trucks running from an operation near my office to Mount Vernon, Washington, and back. It's a brilliant project. It's really, really interesting. We saw work as early as 2021 running from the lower mainland, Greater Vancouver into Seattle, running trips back and forth. Learned a lot from those projects. What we learned is how difficult it is to manage energy consumption moving big stuff. So when I talk about trucks, I'm talking about vehicles that weigh 25,000 pounds or more. The smaller the vehicle, the easier it is. The bigger the vehicle, the harder it is, and it's a logarithmic curve in terms of how hard it gets. So with the big stuff, what we saw running from lower mainland to Seattle, running light loads, running in the summertime, there's no temperature issues. Running south, the truck would arrive with a state of charge not less than 10 to 15%, never less than 10, often around 15. Coming north, same day, same route, same load, same everything, never above 10, often below 2. And the reason for that is the nature of hills. What we've learned is temperature is a problem, but it's not insurmountable. Weight doesn't seem to be much of an issue in terms of efficiency. What kills efficiency are grades, hills. When you're climbing a hill, doesn't matter if it's steep or shallow for an electric vehicle, it's the same energy consumption. When you're coming down, regenerative braking applies, and you can't recapture energy on a steep incline because you've got some energy loss with friction brakes. That's what we learned. Fascinating. We're talking a 10% change in state of charge on a 150-mile run. Wow. Those lessons continue. We have a fleet that has deployed 10 electric vehicles to run locally in the lower mainland and to do some regional runs. What we have learned is those vehicles can run from their depot in the lower mainland almost but not quite to Whistler. And it's because of the grade. It can get to Squamish, for those of you that are familiar with the geography. We also learned from that experience that the background infrastructure is incredibly challenging and important. One of the reasons this company decided to run these vehicles out of that terminal, it's a former freezer. It was a frozen food freezer. So they had an 8 megawatt pull, need 2 megawatts for charging, not a problem. That won't be a problem at all. Yeah, it was. because it hadn't been used as a freezer facility for a couple of decades. Massive residential development in the area meant the utilities said, you're set up for 8 megawatts, but you can't have it. How much do you need? And it became a real issue doing some background grid upgrades. So all of these challenges are there, and what we're finding is these vehicles work, and these are battery electric vehicles, work really well in a local area where they go to bed at night. That's the technical term. They go to bed at night. When you look at running them and in heavy cycles, heavy duty cycles, so I mentioned that one going from Delta, BC, a suburb to Seattle. There are trucks doing it now, and those trucks, there are 4 trucks, and they run up and down. They do 2 rounders a day, down and up, down and up. Well, not anymore with the I-5 construction. I understand this is a bit of a problem, but they would do. That's the regular cycle. The problem is, even with an electric vehicle, even on a really high energy charge, is it takes hours. These are big vehicles. It just takes hours to charge them. These vehicles, to run during that duty cycle, don't stop. You move them continuously. So for that fleet in that duty cycle, you go from 4 vehicles to 6, because you've always got to have one charging at either end to be able to hot seat the drivers coming through. That drives your capital expense, which brings my next piece. Total cost of ownership. One of the problems when we work with manufacturers is they're unsurprisingly working to sell. So they look at it and say, hey, we're going to compare the total cost of ownership for a new alternate fuel vehicle to a new ICE vehicle. And so we're going to look at that. Okay, thing is, in the local market, that's not where new ICE vehicles go. They go in the long distance market. They go in the long haul market. We will see vehicles run 200,000 miles a year for the first couple of years that they're on the road. They will eventually make it into the local area when they've got 1 million kilometers, so 600,000, 700,000, 800,000 miles on them. They'll make it to the lower area. And the purchase price isn't $250,000, it's 60, 70 grand. So all of a sudden, your TCO calculation goes from comparing a $500,000 vehicle, that's net of incentives, and heavy incentives, to comparing that to a $250,000 vehicle. We're talking $500,000 to 60 grand. And the math doesn't work. But that's okay. And we keep saying this to our members, and the companies that are adopting this are saying, that's okay. These are early days. Economy will come. We have to be smart, we have to be diligent, we have to be strategic in where we put these vehicles and where we look for these opportunities. And that's why it's so important to look cross-border to say, where can we go? We can run hub and spoke, we know that. We can move them back and forth, we can do it locally, and there are companies that can do it and do it because they're big and they want to do this and they're leaders. When we start looking regionally, where do we go? Yes, we can run from one suburb in Vancouver to Mount Vernon. How many of those runs are there? Well, not many. Doesn't matter. There's some. And that's what we need to be focusing on. And that's what we're so diligently focusing on, is to say, let's look where the opportunities are. But really, when we look at these opportunities, that is the reality. The vehicles that are here now, they're not ready for prime time. I've talked a little bit about the range. The last thing I'll leave you with, number one thing to remember is a commercial truck is not a vehicle, it's a tool. And when you pick up that tool, it has to work. The number one issue is reliability. And that's been the number one challenge. This is new technology. They sometimes break, they sometimes throw a code and won't move. This is to be expected. This is our iterative learning process. As I keep saying to government decision makers, be strategic with your support. Don't throw a whole bunch of rebate money out there. You have to find the right partner on the right route at the right time. And we're happy to work with you and find that, and understand it's going to be bumpy. The project I mentioned going from by my office to Mount Vernon, great success. They started running earlier this year. They've gone over 6,000 miles. They're really happy with the performance of the vehicle. The service time has been a real problem. The vehicle hasn't been available the majority of the time. It's getting better, and it will get better, and we will get there, but we've got a long way to go, and that's why this work is so important. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Dave. I feel like I just want to second everything you just said. Especially now that I'm working more on the incentive program piece, I think a lot of people have asked me questions about range and, telling me often that zero emission is not a good fit, and my answer is yes, absolutely, I 100% agree. So I think when we're doing our program design currently, a lot of what I'm talking with WashDOT about and walking them through is how do we set up the program so that we're making strategic investments, we're making sure that there's good money available for especially medium duty, so sort of those delivery van type vehicles, because those are a really good sector to be early adopters because it works really well for them. With the understanding that we want to support the Class 7 and 8s, but they are going to need a lot more support to make this transition effective, and it might take a little bit longer. So we have some questions. For anyone who's here and you haven't already, if you have some questions, please put them into the Whova app. We probably won't get through all of them, but we do have one that kind of relates to a question that I've had as well. So they're asking about the challenges and opportunities in the trucking workforce and what you're doing to appeal to younger generations to join the profession. How can we sort of use this opportunity to make drivers' lives better?
Okay. Yeah, it's, honestly, we do see this transition to newer, better technology, cleaner technology, as an opportunity to attract a younger workforce. I mean, there are a lot of old cowboys in the industry, so to speak, cowboys and cowgirls, let's just say, who like their diesel engines and their 18 gears, and, that mentality is not today's generation, so we do see more opportunity for acceptance of zero emission and cleaner vehicles, and we think that will be an opportunity to attract younger people to the industry. Traditionally, we are average age 54. Many of the people that come to the industry are on their second or third career. So if we can flip that and change it, we'd love to do that, but unfortunately, that's the face of it.
Less on driver, but again, talking about the Cully and the Multnomah County Drainage District, there is a need for people to learn how to maintain, support, and look after these electric vehicles, and they're quite different from diesel vehicles in a lot of different ways. Number one, they typically tend to be high voltage DC, which is dangerous, so you need good training to maintain and look after them. They're often much more technically, they need a lot more technical knowledge. Things like battery management systems need to be maintained, and there's a lot of electronics in them that need to be understood and managed. And then something that we've been looking at fairly extensively is vehicle conversion. A lot of these vehicles have a very different life cycle to each of their components. So a lot of them will have, software that can be updated every 6 months or so over the air. They have a chassis that's going to last a very long time. They've got electronics in them, like batteries, that might last for 3 or 4 years. And the idea of maintaining them over a period of time, rather than typical sort of 7 years or 14 years, and they get taken off the road, is a real opportunity, and it helps with not just the fuel consumption, but the manufacturing of those vehicles. But then you want to manufacture them locally, and a lot of these vehicles are not available locally. We're lucky that we've got Daimler in the area, and they can do that, but there's a lot of vehicles that need to be converted. We've been working with, for example, some of the local delivery vehicles, things like school buses, all of which need to be converted over time. And they're probably not going to be converted by buying new ones. They're probably going to be converted, or a lot of them are going to be converted, at least initially, by putting electric motors in them. I noticed Ken Montler's here. He runs a company called Pangaea Motors that's been looking at the lighter vehicle conversions. The nice thing about that is they create jobs in the local area for those individuals. And those jobs are not just conversion jobs, they'll be maintenance jobs going forward. So I think there's some huge opportunities if we do this right. We don't want to just outsource these jobs to buy in new electric vehicles. They need to be maintained and looked after locally, and we should be building capability. We're fortunate that one of the larger diesel training courses is at Portland Community College. We're trying to encourage them to do something similar on the electric side for these high-end electric vehicles.
Great. So I know, Dave, you mentioned that you have several members who are interested in zero-emission vehicles, and Sherry, I'm sure you have some of your membership as well who are interested in this. So can you sort of talk about these companies or these drivers and what is driving their interest in zero-emission vehicles? Why do you think that they're interested in exploring this new technology?
Drivers, because they're like driving a really big, fast go-kart. I mean, seriously, they're amazing. These vehicles, they're silent, they're smooth, there's no vibration, and the power is astounding. So there's a real impetus for that. So sometimes it's hard to find drivers who will sit in because they're the old gearheads. They want to smash the gears and do their thing. But once they try it, they don't get back out. It's really quite interesting. From the company's perspectives, 100% of them that are doing this now are doing it in collaboration or cooperation with their customer or because they're a private fleet. And because those entities have sustainability and environmental goals. 100%. If that doesn't happen, they don't run. So that's the fundamental driver. You talked about the carrot versus the stick. In Canada, we were able, in British Columbia and Quebec, we were able to layer rebates. So we could actually get, depending on where we were at, I think they topped out at about $250,000 rebate on these vehicles. For a discrete unit, it was a huge amount of money. That's why you see the adoption primarily in two provinces, BC and Quebec. And that's why, is because without that support, the economies are just beyond the pale bad. Even with the support, it's difficult. These companies are paying to do the work, but they're committed to doing the work.
I don't know if you have a similar Washington response.
Yeah, I'll just add, just because I want to make it clear, I spoke at a hydrogen conference last year, and the number one question after I got done speaking was, do you support zero emission? Does your industry support? And as I mentioned in my intro, the industry is not a monolith. I mean, we do have a lot of small companies. I think our association takes a little bit different approach than the BCTA because we're here to inform and educate our members. It's up to them to make decisions about how to power their fleets. So we haven't adopted an overall, industry-wide strategy, but I do have several members in the large, usually international carrier category that have a zero emission goals that are actually more aggressive than the states. I mean, they're adopting 2040 goals for sustainability and carbon neutrality. Our membership in general, among the smaller carriers, 2050 is a goal they can get around. I mean, they can get their heads around. They feel that is doable. Again, it's these first years that are difficult for us.
If I could, I just wanted to add one piece to this. And we've been talking about zero emission vehicles, but one of the biggest successes that we and our members had was a program we ran in cooperation with the provincial government, and it was really boring. It was doing more with what we had. So we went forward and went into the marketplace and said, what can we do? What's out there that exists today that's proven technology? Anyone want to guess how many hours a commercial vehicle, a heavy truck, idles in a year on average, North America-wide? 1,800 hours. Well, that's because if you're parked and sleeping overnight long haul, if you're in the mountains, you don't want to freeze, and if you're in the desert, you don't want to bake, so you idle your engine all night. Well, wouldn't it make sense to have an auxiliary power unit, something smaller, on board? Yeah, but they're expensive. So what we did was partner with government and found some incentive dollars to take the sting out of it, so your ROI would be around a year and a half or two. Companies tried it and went, oh my gosh, this is working, and away we went. Folks, we did, you'll see them, they call them next generation wide base single tires. NGW, SBT, I just love this stuff. It's an acronym, so they're fat tires. Instead of dually, you want one big fat one. In some applications with some fleets, you can save between 1% and 3% of your fuel, which coincidentally would be 1% to 3% emissions reduction. We were able to take off the equivalent of, I think it was 55,000 cars off the road over a period of 5 years at the cost of $300 per car because of this. It's incredibly efficient to do monetarily, but it's not sexy. You don't get to point to something new and go, it's a new shiny ZEV vehicle. Well, that's great, and that's important work. We need to do more with what we have right now. And there's lots of ways we can approach this and do some really interesting work. So I'd encourage you to work with your carriers and talk to them about this, because they can do really amazing work, very little cost.
That's an excellent story. And I think that something that can get lost in these conversations about zero emission specifically is that we don't want zero emission at the cost of progress today. And I think that it can be really easy to kind of end up in a either or scenario, when I think we really need to be in a yes and kind of situation. So how do we do everything, including adopting ZEVs, but also innovations in tires or innovations in, switching pieces or components of the vehicle, even getting more lower emission or vehicles using renewable diesel, for example, all reduce emissions and make our air and our communities and our drivers healthier. So we're almost at time, so I'll have you all go down the line and just give some closing remarks if you have any.
Sure, I had the extra one, so it won't take very long. But in all seriousness, when our members look at this, and one of the reasons we approached it this way is one of the constant things that we battle is, how do I help my members be successful? How can I help these folks who are doing it right get better rates, frankly, and make money, as opposed to the bottom feeders who are cheating? I got a whole thing on that one day we can talk about. So how do we do that? This is a way. When we talk about companies and we say, I want you to be a leader, this is how you differentiate yourself. This is how you go to your customers and say, why me, why not you? Because this is what I'm doing. It's just one more way to differentiate. So that was one of the real drivers behind this.
Yeah, and the shipper question, the freight broker, the person that is organizing the freight, that's an important component here. The thing that we keep reminding our members is we are in Washington State. We are on this West Coast corridor. We still have 2050 goals in place, and we have the availability of incentives that are coming up. So the carrots are still there. The innovation still is moving, and we don't see the disruption at the federal level as being as critical as many believe it is. I still appreciate, our members are exploring. Some are even running electric trucks, and we're having ongoing conversations with our Department of Ecology to narrow down to, as you mentioned, short haul and last mile delivery vehicles, things that could be electrified today. So asking our members to dig deep in thinking where they could move the needle in terms of carbon emission reduction.
Yeah, I'll just back up what Beth said. I think it needs to be a yes and model. I heard you talking to Ken a little bit earlier at lunch, and I'll just mention the technology because I think it's really worth exploring, which is this idea of injecting hydrogen into a diesel engine. It creates a much more efficient burn. You can create the hydrogen on the vehicle with a device that takes water and basically splits it into oxygen and hydrogen. You use the engine to do that, but which obviously uses a certain amount of power, but it creates much more efficient burn on the engine. A lot of this technology has been developed for really large diesel operations and things like mining, but it certainly could be scaled to be used in heavy trucks. It could be used in light trucks. and it would be a big step in the right direction. It's a fairly small improvement in efficiency, 10-15%, but it's a huge reduction in tailpipe emissions. So it really helps these communities like Cully, where people are suffering from asthma and other things because of the amount of diesel that's being burned there. So I think you have to think about all these different approaches, and so I'm with you, Bets. Let's figure them all out.
Great. Well, thank you, all three of you, so much for your time and contributions this afternoon. As Bruce said at the beginning, this is a two-part panel. So now that our time is up, I'm going to hand things over to Lindsay Kislock, who's the moderator for our next panel, Panel B, and also invite Matt Donovan from Deloitte and Diane Howard from Port of Benton to come join us.
And as you all come up, I'm going to guess that you all who are here now want to hear this next program, and it's all part of this umbrella. So if you bear with me there, I think there's some coffee outside, but let's go ahead and get through this panel and get you out of here maybe closer to 3:30 or so. So give you a longer second break. So Lindsay has been a good partner with Penware for a couple of years now with Westac, and she'll explain what Westac is. Last year, she was part of a panel at our Whistler conference, and it was very helpful. And we've got some great speakers here, and I hope maybe some of our folks that were on the original panel can stick around because I think we might have some follow-up questions on trucking. Lindsay?
Teamwork. So yes, Part B, system integration, we're going to look at supply chains and logistics. And I'm joined by Diane Howard, who's the Executive Director from the Port of Benton, Matt Donovan, Manager with Deloitte Infrastructure and Transportation out of Washington, D.C. And I'm Lindsay Kislock, the President and CEO of the Western Transportation Advisory Council based in Vancouver. So we've got kind of 3 jurisdictions covered. We talked about trucking and energy corridors, and now we're going to talk about systems integration from a different perspective. Westac is a nonprofit organization established over 50 years ago. Well, that's the Port of Benton. So we might come up with the Westac slides, but if we don't, that's fine too. Established over 50 years ago by Western provinces, so Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and British Columbia, along with 9 other transportation leaders that recognized they needed to work together to get goods to market in Western Canada. So they formed this organization called Westac, and today we are represented by 62 transportation leaders at a very senior level. And the slides would give you a snapshot of that, but we spend our days and time thinking about the major issues impeding the efficient movement of people and goods within the 4 Western provinces, as well as to domestic and world markets. The issues won't be unfamiliar to you that members tackle, whether they're increasing capacity, sourcing sufficient capital, skilled labor issues, forecasting, and most recently, tariff-related issues and what that means. So there are my slides. Vision and mission are pretty standard. These are our members. So as I said, about 60 members. These are our private sector members. Everybody, kind of the who's who in transportation in Western Canada. The ports of Vancouver, Prince Rupert, Nanaimo. We go as far east to the Port of Thunder Bay and the St. Lawrence Seaway because they have an interest in what is happening in Western Canada transportation, as well as the Class 1 railways, CN, CPKC, and BNSF. And then, most importantly, the shippers that are using the transportation system. So one of the things Westac brings, the original systems integrator, is actually bringing people together for collaboration. If government wants to talk to industry, we can quickly bring them together. Another thing that differentiates Westac is that one of our original founding members was a labor union, and labor continues to have a strong representation at Westac. In our Westac membership, and I think it keeps the conversations honest, and you come up with solutions that aren't at the benefit, aren't taking advantage of workers, that are based in realistic real world situations. So those are our labor members. And then government members, as I mentioned, the Western provinces were the founding members. They've been joined by Transport Canada. We have the Port of Prince Rupert. So those municipal jurisdictions that have a big play in transportation in Metro Vancouver are members. So kind of a unique organization. We often joke that it's the best kept secret in transportation in Western Canada. Our members come together twice a year in our forums, and that is systems integration. We put on a program much like Penwar does for its members, and they love the program, but I think what they really like is the networking that happens. So semi-annual forums, we do an annual survey called the Compass Survey. I'll talk a bit about that in a minute. But you can find all of our Compass surveys. We've been doing it for 8 years. We survey transportation leaders in the fall of each year, ask them kind of how are they feeling about the business climate, what are the transportation issues, business operating issues. We bring new ministers. When a new minister is appointed, we bring a group of members together to help quickly brief a minister on transportation issues. And then we take on special projects. So the Compass report last year was done between October 25th and November 8th. And so we were in the field during a tumultuous time, the US presidential election underway. And it's interesting, you know, when you ask transportation executives a question, you get really, I think, insightful and critical answers. So key insights, it had been a tough year in '24 with disruptions on the West Coast and in transportation with strikes and climate-related issues. So disruptions and political risks were at the top of everyone's thoughts. A focus on short-term stability, trying to get back to stability after recovering from labor issues. The systemic challenges that are undermining the supply chain confidence. Really, that's the unpredictability, I think that's code for. And then the ongoing productivity challenge that we are facing in Canada, probably to a greater extent than in the US, for sure. Top 5 business challenges on their minds last year were disruptions. We were during the election period. There was concern about geopolitical risk and uncertainty. We were in an uncertain time in Canada. In the fall, the Liberal government was very unpopular. The Prime Minister was unpopular, and you saw that in terms of domestic political risk and uncertainty. Things changed quite dramatically, I think unpredictably in Canada after our survey period, and but you could see how the concern rated highly. Supply chain resilience and sustainability, and then trade and tariffs and protectionism. Not a surprise, transportation disruptions, the need and the uncertainty that comes with disruptions, the lack of a coordinated long-term infrastructure plan. If you don't have a plan, you're planning to fail. We haven't had an infrastructure plan in Canada for about 10 years. You know, the heyday in transportation, when transportation and logistics in Canada rated highly, were the days of the Asia-Pacific Initiative, when the federal government took a leadership role, indicated what their priorities were, and the private sector fell in behind and could make investments with certainty. And we are always advocating to move back to a place where there is a long-term infrastructure plan for Canada. That has impacted the lack of a plan, and our disruptions that we've experienced has impacted our reputation as a reliable supplier. It has also raised the reliability issue, and there's always the cost competitiveness issue when you're asking people to do more and pay more for different activities. So that is Westac. And then finally, if we were going to talk about what we needed to tackle, we need to enhance our rail network. We talked about trucking. Trucking is really important, but when you're talking about moving many of the goods that are traded in world markets from Canada, you need rail. So we need to enhance our rail network. We need to improve it. We need to expand exports beyond the Port of Vancouver. It is congested. Digitization and data transparency play an important role, and I thought Dave's final comments around doing more with what you have. optimization. We shouldn't be investing more money until we know we've got the max out of the infrastructure and the assets that we already have. And I think digitization and data transparency is key to that. And I think we will hear a bit about that from Matt. And then finally, it is an issue, project approvals in Canada, so the need to streamline project approvals, and you may have seen the federal government in Canada has recognized that with Bill C5, and they are going to fast track projects of national significance within 2 years. So we remain hopeful for that. British Columbia has also recognized they had a regulatory issue and passed legislation in their spring session to try to fast track critical mineral mines and other important clean energy projects. So that is Westac. Our website is up there. All of our Compass surveys are available there, and I'd ask you to look for it in the fall. We'll be back in the field for our 9th annual survey. So that was the original. So getting people together is the original systems integration. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Diane now, and she's going to talk to you about multimodal systems integration, I believe.
Thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate it. It's terrific to join you and Matt and everyone here today to discuss these timely topics. I'm going to wait for my PowerPoint to load and then hopefully get the clicker. As mentioned, my name is Diane Howard, and I'm the Executive Director of the Port of Benton. And I'm also the Administrator of the Northwest Vertical Innovation Cluster that's both are based in the Tri-Cities, located in Eastern Washington. To kick off my remarks, though, I'm going to start with a short video that highlights some of our region's competitive advantages and the efforts underway of our Northwest Advanced Clean Energy Park. So here we go.
Tri-Cities, Washington. The Northwest Clean Energy Hub. Home to leading research, technology, and manufacturing industries with a global impact. An experienced workforce with a strong talent pipeline. Where an industry-led innovation cluster and community partners are transforming an advanced clean energy park vision into a reality. The place to create, manufacture, and deploy next-generation products and technologies. A U.S. manufacturing center and transportation hub for components of clean energy systems to be shipped worldwide. Working with the Department of Energy on planning for future community economic development. Unlimited potential for future growth to support the transition to a net zero economy. This is the place. Join us. The Northwest Advanced Clean Energy Park, accelerating the nation's clean energy future.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the State of Washington. Department of Commerce has been with us since 2022 as part of the ICAP cluster, and they actually helped fund that video. So I appreciate Josh is here today, and Jen Cash. So thank you so much. Briefly about the Tri-Cities, our population is about 320,000. We have over 18 million people, however, within a 500-mile radius of the Tri-Cities. And we're located at the confluence of the Columbia and the Snake River system near the Oregon border. And we comprise of the cities of Richland, Pasco, and Kennewick, and I'll even throw in West Richland, since if I don't, Mayor Gary would be upset with me. So our community, though, however, has been an agriculture and clean energy powerhouse for decades. Major employers include Battelle, Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Cadillac Regional Medical Center, Lamb Weston, our local K-12 system, as well as the U.S. Department of Energy's Hanford site. We are Site W. If you've seen the Oppenheimer movie, it was not Washington, D.C., it was Washington State they were talking about, and Tri-Cities, Washington, just to the north, literally across the street from my office is the Hanford site. It's about half the size of the state of Rhode Island, 586 square miles. So Hanford site contractors and other agribusiness, as well as advanced manufacturing and nuclear energy companies. The Tri-Cities is also the location of one of the Pacific Northwest hydrogen hubs major projects. If you were in that panel yesterday, you probably heard about it from Chris Green, Atlas Agro. Atlas Agro is a green fertilizer company that is slated to purchase property from the Port of Benton within the Northwest Advanced Clean Energy Park. In addition, we also lead the state with our carbon emission reduction target of 100% clean electricity by 2045. Why? Because in a 100-mile radius of our region, we have nuclear energy. Columbia is the only nuclear reactor in the state of Washington, run by Energy Northwest, again, just outside of my office. We have hydropower, wind, and solar, and we are working to deploy new nuclear in our community, along with portions of that industry, its supply chain, and of course, the workforce that goes with it. The companies that are helping us pave the way for developing this next generation nuclear energy projects is a collaboration and partnership, again, with Energy Northwest, X-Energy, Amazon, TerraPower, NewScale, and Avalanche Energy. All of these companies have Tri-Cities connections. So now I want to go on to a little bit about the Port of Benton itself. So the Port of Benton was established in 1958 to power industrial growth in our region and economic diversification. Our economic development focus drives business growth, leverages our transportation assets, and fosters trade and tourism for our region's people and diverse industries. The Port of Benton's district covers 2/3 of Benton County, with the port managing over 2,800 acres of property. We have over 50 buildings, 12 property sites across our district with vast industrial land, including 250 acres of waterfront, 2 general aviation airports, a barge complex with a high and low dock, as well as our short line rail, which is what we're going to focus on today. The importance of our short line rail is that it's served by both Class 1s that can run direct on our line, the BNSF Railway and Union Pacific. And over the decades, we've really built strong partnerships with other economic development entities, government agencies in our community to advance transportation, supply chain, and energy initiatives that are so vital to our region. So the region's industries that utilize the Port of Benton's barge slip and high dock are located on the Columbia River, and I know Sochi's here, and part of our marine highway, M84. We're also wanting to connect into the green shipping corridor that connects markets throughout the Northwest to the rest of the world. John Wolf mentioned this during our luncheon, and we also plan to be a part of that collaborative system of the green shipping corridor, and he was talking about the line that ultimately would go to Vietnam. Our region's industries also ship the second highest tonnage of goods, so our rail line is 1.2 million tons on our rail, and we love those French fries, which is the #2 export to the Northwest Seaport Alliance that comes out of our region. The other claim to fame we've got in Richland is we have the world's largest freezer in the North American continent, Lineage Logistics, so I'm just going to keep throwing out my fun facts. So with the significant amount of goods that are moved by truck from our region to the West Coast seaports, the U.S. Department of Transportation has identified the interstate in our area along I-84 as a freight trucking bottleneck. We've got resulting in up to 750,000 truck hours in delay annually. In addition, those trucks also access the I-5 interstate to reach the seaports in the Seattle-Tacoma area, which also has some congestion and other limitations, as we all know, for those of us that live here. So to help alleviate some of the truck and seaport congestion, the Port of Benton has partnered with the Seaport Alliance. The port has a 90,000 square foot rail-served facility to support distribution and transload hub on a 425 acre greenfield site called the Northwest Intermodal Facility. Tenants currently include BioGrow, we have Barnhart Crane, and Columbia Rail is our short line operator. The facility is also in the middle of the port and city of Richland's over 5,000 acres of industrial property, and we also offer foreign trade zone. The area is also envisioned as part of the Eastern Washington Logistics Hub that was mentioned as well during lunch, and also along with the projects in Pasco with Dairy Gold and Tri-City Intermodal Project in the Burbank area. The Northwest Intermodal Facility will provide access to Seattle-Tacoma terminals, including on-dock rail, eliminating the 460-mile round-trip truck move, maximizing efficiency for rail shipments to the Washington seaports. And with the biggest advantage being that you've got rail access from Richland to Tacoma, Seattle, 24 hours, 7-day-a-week service. We're also in discussions with our counterparts. We've just started those discussions. I think Darren was here earlier from Cranbrook. We're also working with our Idaho colleagues in Spokane about the potential coordination between the Port of Benton and the West Coast seaports to facilitate transportations of goods and build out our corridors and supply chains. An essential part of our efforts at the port is also our electrification initiatives. We're exploring electric vehicle truck storage in the Northwest Intermodal Facility. Our team is also evaluating the installation of a microgrid at the facility as well as at one of our port's regional GA airports. And thanks to the Washington State Legislature and the Department of Transportation, I see Jason here, we've also accessed a port electrification grant that we're currently making investment into our barge facility with shore power infrastructure. Now on to another hat in my other role. I also have the wonderful opportunity to administer the Vertical Innovation Cluster, which is the Port of Benton has, as I mentioned earlier, has been collaborating with the state of Washington even before 2022, but that was the start of the program, the ICAP program, that got us here. Vertical is an industry-led Northwest Innovation Cluster focusing on accelerating the deployment of next-generation nuclear energies, such as small modular reactors. You've heard a lot about small modular reactors this week. Vertical really is engaged across the Northwest. We're really looking to build the ecosystem and rebuild and modernize that industry's domestic supply chain and really solve other challenges that hinder the wide-scale deployment of new nuclear in the U.S. So, okay, that's great. What have you been doing? Well, first and foremost, we also created the Clean Energy Supplier Alliance. So companies from small to global businesses that work in the nuclear industry, creating a center of excellence, and also we're again working with Energy Northwest to deliver and deploy the X-Energy project and make sure that we've got our ready workforce. But I would say probably the biggest lift we've had to date was our collaborative efforts to drive integration and shore up the U.S. supply chain for new nuclear. Vertical was the principal in a finalist application to the National Science Foundation to establish the Northwest Energy Accelerator Region Innovation Engine. Yes, an engineer came up with the acronym. NEAR, nuclear, which is based in the Tri-Cities and spans across other areas, again, of Washington and Idaho. Again, we partnered industry-led, Energy Northwest, Amazon, X-Energy, Curio, which is a reprocessor of fuel, Atkins Realis, and Framatome, Washington State, Jen and Josh that are here today, the Pacific Northwest National Lab, Idaho National Lab, and Washington State University's Institute of Northwest Energy Futures, as well as the Intermountain West Nuclear Energy Corridor, or the Tech Hub of Idaho, along with other partners on this effort. And even though we were not selected, we are still working with our partners to coordinate so many components of this model, and we're seeking other sources and partnerships to support it. What we learned from this process was phenomenal about the needs of within the supply chain, our needs for energy, logistics, hubs, and definitely the build out of our corridor. Port hat on, what am I doing? I'm really trying to make sure that our infrastructure is ready to meet this moment. Trying to make sure my community is seeing the benefit of the economic development that can occur and basically create jobs and new investments. I want to see these companies be successful because I want to see us meet the goals, and I believe that is critically important. And I thank Pinwar for all the work that you have done and all the essential work that all of you are doing. Collaboration is definitely challenging, and the port is working to ready again our systems and infrastructure to meet business demand. We need a clearly articulated and shared mission. We need to provide companies with the confidence in their investments, which comes with certainty, regulatory, and planning. And we need to support these ecosystems by building trust and honestly breaking down some of the silos that exist between all of us. And our united continental energy and security, I believe, truly depend upon it. And so with that, I'll close and turn it over to Matt.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. That's a tough act to follow. You have many hats, a lot going on, and really, as we've listened to folks talk about the different portions of our supply chain, thinking of trucking, thinking of the role a port plays, intermodal, the power supply to go to all of this. What I've been asked to share a little bit about is how we're thinking about technology and the way that it can help integrate some of these conversations and really be used by accelerators and clusters like Diane has just spoken about. So as we get into this, let's see if I can get my slides to come up here. So Nate's pulling them up. So if you were at breakfast this morning, I think one message we've said quite a bit is that infrastructure hasn't become more complicated. We're still building at the end of the day. We're still using concrete and steel. It's everything else around it that's become much more complicated. So as we're thinking about the demands that our community has for systems, the interest that we have in being environmentally resilient and resilient against changes in our communities, the way we need to think about technology integration, those are the problems that are making this a much more complicated conversation. And then you couple it with the new technology that's emerging that's changing the way we might use a combustion engine. It's changing the battery storage we might have or things like that. So while Nate's still pulling this up, what I'll voice over a little bit is, we're asked to do all of this, but our tools haven't changed that much. So we're still seeing paper-based processes on billion-dollar infrastructure projects. We're still using offline collaboration while we talk about the need to have better data sharing between projects. And sometimes email and Excel are our best tools, which if you're an engineer, you live out of them, your charts, your plans. But there's a way to start thinking a little bit differently in how we can move forward to that. With all that context in mind, we're also trying to react right now. There's policy whiplash at all the federal levels in both countries right now, changes in our administrations and in our priorities. Our communities have different demands on infrastructure. You represent a port. Nobody knew what a port really did until COVID, and we all saw packages sitting offshore, and we said, why is my good from Amazon not here, and where is it, and how is it stuck? As our communities are starting to think more about the experience that they have on passenger rail, I also get to shout out Jason, and I'm thinking about Amtrak Cascades. And as we have so many millions of people come to this region for FIFA next year, it takes one bad experience for that to leave a lasting taste in someone's mind. And so our communities are looking at the systems that we have differently. Beyond that, we're also seeing infrastructure assets become increasingly technology assets. So overall, what they are becoming are connected, smart portions of our community, and they have to talk to one another in a way, frankly, that didn't have to happen before. So as you hear Dave speaking earlier about the freezer power to the warehouse in BC that he referenced, things are changing, and there's updated data that can tell us exactly how the power grid needs to respond to that and whether the facility is ready for that or not. So as all of that is context for what we're reacting to, what are we seeing people do right now? As we've been working with clients around AI and transportation and energy planning tools, there's really three areas of technology adoption that we've been recommending people think about. The first, you gave a great example of this, but fostering a community approach, and one that both promotes top-down from wherever your organization sits. If you're in government, opening the doors for using AI and for thinking about technology differently. If you sit at a public sector agency, letting your whole team, if you sit at the head of that agency, agency do this. If you set out a team within an agency, letting your team use tools differently. On the private sector side, I think really embracing this from a leadership perspective and letting ideas bubble through all levels of the organization changed a little bit what we see. I'm going to cruise through a few things here. Thanks, Tom, just because we've covered this. But I want to stop on this, which is, as we're talking about technology, we're not trying to change the way we build things, but we're trying to ask a different question. So we always ask, can we build it? And that's a right question. Can we build something? How would we do it? But it's not the full question overall. What we're trying to say is technology can help us answer some of these questions as we're going through that process. So can we do something resiliently? Can we build it and use integrated technology from the moment we're conceptualizing the idea and then letting that technology follow everything from the planning process, the financing process, the build process, the ongoing operation process? How can we ensure efficient operation? Does it meet the need that we're building it for? Is it doing it properly? How can we de-risk from whatever it is that we need to de-risk from right now? There's plenty of things to choose from. And some of these other questions here are ways that we think technology can answer planning questions a little bit differently. Before we get to all of that, we also would say our clients should be asking, should we? Are we building the right thing? Why are we building it? And is it answering the mission that we need? So with that in mind, I'm going to skip through these because I voiced them over, but this is where I was going to land. So I just covered number one, making a top-down commitment. That's letting your leadership really buy in from an AI perspective. The second is taking an ecosystem approach. I think ports represent a fascinating opportunity. Westac has an amazing opportunity because you're conveners to say collectively, if one agency among us makes a drastic change and embraces this, but their neighbors and their partners don't, we only move as fast as the lowest and slowest adopter in the system. So working with your peers, your communities to advance that together as an ecosystem is essential for us to see drastic change across our systems. The last I'll say is embracing technology as a complementary approach to what we have right now. There's obviously conversation around whether AI will replace jobs. There's definitely thinking about ways that processes might change forever. But if you approach everything looking at it as a solution to replace the way you're doing things today, that's looking at the problem wrong. What we would recommend is thinking about ways you can build technology in as a supplement, as a complement, as an addition to your current process. If you're a traffic planner right now, there is an amazing body of science behind how we plan for traffic, how we plan for supply chain, how we move boxes on rail. And what we would say is you don't have to reinvent that. Use a technology tool that adds further insight into that process. And then think about how your process can feed technology so that year over year when you refresh that plan or you react to a certain situation, you're getting new insight and you're learning from what you've done previously. What I'll go to next is just sharing a couple examples where we're seeing people doing this effectively. So how are leaders and where are leaders leveraging technology to build better infrastructure? One example I'll give, you showed a great graphic, Diane, around development outside of your port and thinking about ways it's connected into the system and all of this. As we've traditionally looked at the planning process, data is siloed. It sits differently at the local level, the regional level, the federal level, the state level, and then every private sector partner loves to say we'll play in the sandbox and not share our data, especially if you're dealing with a Class 1 railway or something like that. There's a huge, huge need to share data and move across that. We also have limited ways right now to measure the impact of doing X, Y, or Z when we're thinking about a project. So scenario planning for what our outcomes could be. And then we're also seeing this landscape of policies, funding I would throw into this category. It's all changing every single day, and sometimes our planning process might be 10 years long, and it's changed 17 times as we're getting ready for something to build. So how are we seeing clients deliver on planning with technology? We actually took a screenshot here of, this is Broward County, Florida, so down in the Miami area, Fort Lauderdale, that you see on the right here. The Metropolitan Planning Organization in Broward has been working with us to think differently about how they plan for future development. So what they're looking at is the potential impact that planned development in certain neighborhoods might have, measuring things like resilience, impacts on the traffic system, measuring where future transit locations could be, thinking down to the level of as sea level rises, where might culverts be impacted by increased salinity in the water and things like this. We're seeing them use this live scenario planning to actually inform developers where they should build and where it makes most sense for their communities. Another example I'll give is really around operations, and this is a traffic example, but we actually see the same thing happening with our energy grid right now. It's really hard to balance your peak traffic flow and congestion and think about how we can be responding to whether it's accident needs, roadway issues, maintenance fast, and zeroing in on where the problems might be before they happen. And then how can we proactively maintain the systems as they get more and more complex. What we're seeing as an example in California right now is leveraging an AI tool. Again, this is a screenshot on the right-hand side that's doing real-time detection of irregularities. Google Maps can tell you that. You know, we all use that as we get around. It shows you where traffic might be. But what this is starting to show us is where the patterns might occur over a 10-year period of time. When we work in conjunction and tear down data silos, what California started to do is work to actually upload 10 years worth of traffic accident data onto the roadway system. So you can start to map where accidents are occurring on top of where congestion might be at peak times, and starting to look for patterns, areas that we could change our system to proactively respond to those. The last I'll give is an event-based opportunity. This goes for everything from a concert, a public event, to planned vacation time, to a planned vessel call or an unplanned vessel call if you're a port with more turn times coming out and gate reservations up. What we're seeing right now is the need to enhance the experience of people or goods. We want to be as efficient as possible as folks are moving in and out. We want to minimize disruptions to the normal flow of our communities. And then we're also hoping to think through creative ways to get people to avoid traffic in one way or another. Where we're seeing this right now is in California again. What you actually see on the right-hand side is a live picture of traffic during the Taylor Swift concert at SoFi Stadium a few years ago. What we saw is there's an ability to actually map how an event will change demand throughout the day on roadways, how accidents or incidents will correlate to that, and to start to recommend patterns over event after event on the best possible ingress and egress routes for people as they've left something like that. We're seeing the same application around ports as you're looking at how gate reservation systems might be able to coordinate with turn times and where things are going down the end of the supply chain. So those are just a few examples of where we're seeing this. And I think to close, you know, you've really, Diane, captured a great area of collaboration in an ecosystem. That's what it takes. I think the question we have to be asking is not what technology tool can we use, because that's a hammer looking for a nail. It's really what problem are we solving for as a collective and trying to go after that. So thank you.
Diane, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to tell Matt, good job. And I think that's really a great point, because that's the question with from a port perspective and as cluster perspective, we're asking industry, what is the problem that we can help solve? It's not, I know, government, we're here to help. It's not that. It's what is the problem that they're really trying to solve? And how can we put the very best team around that to accelerate what they're trying to do? In our case, our big interest on that is honestly accelerating deployment of this new technology. We're all talking about energy. Dawn mentioned yesterday at Seattle City Light about how, her timeline for small modular reactors. We need to accelerate that. How can we help them? What are the resources that need to be put around that? What teams need to be, what is the very best team to make that happen? So from port perspective, that's what we're trying to do with industry. That's the type of collaboration that we're talking about. And I'd say the same thing flips to my day job, right? Same thing with supply chain. I want my businesses and my companies to be able to grow. And I want to be able to help retain the companies we have and bring in and recruit new ones. And again, we have to collaborate and make sure that we can get their products through that gateway, because the trade, trade goes where it's easiest. So we're trying to make sure that we're one of the very best and we're one of the easiest options to make sure that that product flows. Sorry, just to add it.
Yeah, no, it's great. So we do have the Whova app. You can use that to ask questions of the panel if you have them, or we can go old school and you can just raise your hand and shout out your question. That also works. So while you ponder what questions you might have, because these were amazing presentations. The Port of Benton, I thought I was getting one thing and I've got at least 3. So the questions will be innumerable that I'll have for you. And Matt, same thing. It's so related. We didn't actually rehearse this, but your presentation and what you're involved in is really complementary to what Diane is doing. So you were both talking about systems integration in a variety of ways and using systems integration. What do you think needs to happen to get closer to true integration or to improve the integration you're already seeing? What is the secret sauce to integration?
Take it first. I don't think anybody knows the true answer, but the foundation of it is trust. It's saying we have a data need, we have insights that can be gleaned from across our separate organizations, and until we open the door of trust to share enough with one another, whether it's public sector data, private sector data, we can't solve the challenge and truly integrate a system if not all parties are at the table and willing to put up the detail that they have in that piece of the puzzle.
That's a great answer. Diane?
I would, it goes back to my earlier comments, Matt, exactly right. Collaboration is not an easy task. It is not easy to collaborate. We need to break down barriers. We think that we don't have them, we still do. We really need to, it's not only sharing data, but definitely building trust, but it's what Pinwar is doing right now as part of this event. Getting together, having conversations, actually having the hard conversations, and really trying to solve those problems. But it's definitely siloed still, and we need to work past that. But that takes people like Bruce and organizations like Pinwar. We need boots on the ground, because this is not just doing it within your own community or with your own organization. We're trying to branch and reach further and go farther, and I think that's what makes it really hard.
Right. I mean, you get to know the people, you know who to call when you have a problem, they know you. And it's always interesting to me, because when things go badly, when they go really badly, they go really badly for everybody. So even if one company is experiencing a systems outage, it has ripple effects across the whole system. So, why can't we trust each other? Because we know we're going to benefit, we will all grow together, and we're all going to go down together, really. So let's try and share and collaborate more. Diane, I was blown away by the number of things you're doing. Honestly, I was thinking Port of Benton, I did some research, inland port, you had a lot of activities going on just at the port. How do you decide what you're going to do each day, and what makes the top of your priority list?
So I always joke, we're a workhorse, we're not a show horse port. And that is definitely true, and I'd say it's a compliments to my team. I have a fantastic team, but we are really working in various areas, wine industry, ag innovation, new nuclear, advanced energy, advanced manufacturing, our rail, 2GA airports, park facility. We're trying to be a beneficial public asset to our community. Ports reflect their community. And I believe that we're really trying to make sure that the Port of Benton is accomplishing that and helping our community members and helping our members grow. A little tied to the nuclear piece, since I have the mic. The other thing is we really want to understand and be smart about new clean energy. That's why new nuclear is really exciting to us, as well as fusion. And it's not only it's fusion and fission for us. Avalanche, having Avalanche in our backyard right now is really exciting. We also have a 125 megawatt solar project in partnership with Tushy Energy and Energy Northwest. And we also have an enricher to our Canadian friends, and I heard I'm supposed to really get to friendly and learn about Saskatchewan. So for the uranium, right? And I'd say when it comes to next level elevation of those fuels, Framatome has been 50 years in our community. They are global fuel centers named in Richland in the state of Washington, even though it's a French-American company, because of the united vision that we have. So I see for us fuels, advanced manufacturing, ag innovation, because ag needs energy too. We've also got biosciences and aerospace as well, and I think that that's the opportunity that we have along this corridor.
What I heard from your presentation is that you're listening to your community and your stakeholders, and you're trying to do the right thing. Not because you're mandated to do it, but because it is the right thing to do. And I think that's really compelling.
I'm trying. I only make a couple people mad.
So Matt, Deloitte's involved in lots of tech projects. Whether it's AI, digital twins. Can you talk a bit about kind of what it takes to move from an idea or a concept to really successful operation? being able to operationalize technology?
Absolutely. I think the first is a willingness to take a risk. And so I'll actually backtrack a moment to your comment earlier around how we need to kind of approach this collectively and say, the first thing we do in an ecosystem when we want to build something, do something, we pass the hat and we look for funding. And we say, what are all the ways we can do this? The same is true of risk. It de-risks decisions when we try these things together. And so if we're looking at an organization level and how to bring something in, often it's easy to do a pilot, to try something. It's minimally risky inside of an organization, but also to think through how we work through that community approach together. I think the other thing is being willing to focus on the human side of all of this. And so at the end of the day, we can't implement technology problems and solutions without thinking about the ways people will interact with them. And so whether it's organizational change management and readiness and training of how these can supplement existing systems, or thinking about the way they can help prepare for the jobs of the future. So as you're looking at your development in your community, Diane, you're talking about workforce as well, I'm certain. And so thinking through just broadly, how are we preparing a workforce for the tools that we know are emerging today or the ones that we imagine might come the next time, focusing on bringing people along for that journey with technology because it can do a whole world for us, but it doesn't act alone without us.
I think that's a really good point. The technology can be the most amazing technology in the world, but if it doesn't have the support of the people, it's not happening. So I'm going to check the Whova app, but I'm also looking in the room for people who might have burning questions. You've got tremendous resource here in Diane and Matt, and this is your chance to ask them a question if you're brave enough to raise your hand. Go ahead, Jen.
I have a question for Matt. Matt, can you talk about some of the more successful, It's okay. Oh, I see. Hi. I have a question for Matt, because I know you're based at the National HQ. Can you talk about some examples when you've seen state government or governor level or local really step up that made that critical difference on a big project or initiative? What does that look like? Where are some states to look at? Just curious what you've seen.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, for the question. And we'll be on the same flight home, I'm sure, this week back to the other side of the country. But, I'll give two examples. I'll give the example, both that I talked a little bit about earlier. In Florida, we're seeing county-level government and metropolitan planning organizations willing to say, we have the convening power and enough stakeholders here to start something and be catalytic to it. So we're seeing them introduce adoption of a platform, think through the way that the cities associated with this county do planning. They're thinking about the way that stakeholders interact with their technology tools. So there's actually a conversation around, do we take this digital twin they're using for planning and make it publicly accessible in the local science museum so that community members can go play with it and look at it? And that's not been done. That's an interesting way of thinking about planning and the conversation around it. In California, I'll give the example of, and we've seen this in so many other places, we've seen universities do this, but recently in California there was an AI competition where they said, before we get way down the road with huge technology contracts and start with this, let's put some seed money out, let's see who responds with basic proofs of concept. Here's the problem we're trying to solve. Tell us your best answer, your best response, build a team around that, and then we will evaluate and decide what the 5-year plan looks like from there. And so sometimes being willing to seed the idea is enough of a catalytic start to get people thinking about it, and then it's one where government can make a safer, de-risked bet because they've seen what's been produced and they've been able to compare a slate of options to that.
And I think, building on what Dave Earle said earlier, there's nothing better than a small pilot or a project that is seeded because it never rolls out the way you expect it to. There's always something to learn. And if you just go big bang, you're going to be disappointed. But if you start small and build, it's probably a better way to go. Resiliency and reliability come up a lot in transportation and are dependent on the confidence that shippers and citizens have in their systems. As systems get more complex, how do you ensure systems get more complex, organizations get more complex? What would be your advice for ensuring resiliency and reliability?
So for the Port of Benton, we really try to take a proactive approach. I think that that is the key. It's coordination, it's cooperation. You know, we're going to compete later with our colleagues, but right now we need to work together in order to ensure that we've got that resilience built in. So that for us is really important. Our infrastructure is critically important for us for resiliency, continuous review, continuous learning, to your AI point. So for us with staff, I just have a weekly meeting with my team and, hey, how are you using AI? Do you want to share that with us? What does that look like? We do have some policy around it, don't get me wrong, it's not open. But I want to see how they're using it and what is it that we could then bring to the table to help them learn alongside of it. Because I think teaching everybody how to work alongside it is really going to be what's critical to take us forward. It will help with the efficiency as well. I know that kind of went a little outside your question, but it is, for us, resiliency is about making sure our infrastructure is ready to respond to the moment and honestly just trying to be more proactive, listening to our industry.
I think it was during the conversation yesterday where we had an economist on the main stage, and he suggested that it's really a shame more organizations don't have an economic disaster plan. We have natural disaster plans, or we have supply chain disaster contingency plans. Having a plan for everything, there's not always money to do it, but when you start to think through the business case of the small investment in a plan to mitigate the large spend should something go wrong, that's a conversation that can be enabled with or without technology. We just should be thinking about all of the scenarios we can plan for and the cost of not planning. Too often in our sort of infrastructure transportation orbit, we're reactive and we come up with a solution after a major problem as opposed to being ready for that. And we don't want to wait for that incident to happen before we have one. I think the other thing from a resiliency perspective is thinking about the community again and how our systems rely on one another. And so I'll give the great example that you know all too well of the atmospheric river a couple of years ago, where we saw Port of Vancouver cut off for a number of days and weeks. I think we passed a week. So, you know, thinking through not just what is our local contingency plan, but how does the broader regional supply network support ourselves? And how do we think through proactively, whether it's gaming out scenarios, whether it's simple coordination, whether it's a weekly meeting to have that discussion, what happens the next time, whether it's north or south of the border, but how does our system and how do our neighbors help us out of that situation?
I think those are really good thoughts. There is going to be a next time. That's the one thing that's for sure. And you don't have to have you can iterate on a plan that you already have, because the response to an atmospheric river incident would be very similar to a response to potentially to a coronavirus incident. So, you know, you don't have to start at square one, I think, every time. You can iterate on those plans, but really have those plans. And the idea of an economic recovery or a plan that responds to economic conditions is, I think, great advice. So Bruce promised you that you would have a couple of extra minutes. So I'm going to turn it over to Bruce.
Thank you. We are going to give you a couple extra minutes. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 4 o'clock is our Cascades Rail session, and that will be in this room or this room. So take a break and come back and join us. It's going to be a great session. Just two quick comments. One, I want to give a lot of appreciation to our hardworking staff. Patty, Hannah, Tom, will you raise your hands back there? And Tom, I know you're going crazy with this technical stuff, but you made it through. As we went through 8 sessions in 2 days, and we have a great maritime and aviation sessions tomorrow, we did a lot of discussion about who should be on these panels. And you're talking about PINWR's role in terms of convening stakeholders, public and private leaders, but we also play a bit of a matchmaker. And so, you know, what I've gotten out of these sessions today is the chemistry between the panelists. Even to a point where there were some, you know, challenges on some situations with regard to logistics. Healthy, good dialogue. It's been, and I think that's kudos to our staff that are, you know, looking at resumes and sifting through and what are we trying to say here and how many people should we have. I think we picked some real winners. The second thing I would think would be, and we're going to talk about this in the next session, and we've been talking about it the whole Summit, FIFA World Cup. Pinmore has a particular role in taking a look at how we get people between Seattle and Vancouver. The folks in Seattle and Vancouver are taking care of the folks getting to their venues. But how do you get across that border? There will be no rental cars in the entire area. So transit, carpools, trains, you know, all kinds of things. I'm glad you mentioned the Swift concert. That was just one event, one night that the border waits were 2 or 3 hours long. There's a high-speed rail ferry operating out of Vancouver that ran extra runs from downtown Vancouver to Nanaimo because they have these young Swift fans that could never afford to stay in a hotel overnight, so they ran this kind of emergency service. If you could apply technology in the next 11 months to help us figure out how in the heck we're going to get all those people across that border. I've heard 350,000 fans coming to Vancouver and 350,000 fans coming to Seattle. The border people have been great to work with in terms of how we process that. We've got some ideas about transit and trains and intercity coaches, but it's like a Dunkirk operation or evacuating 9/11. 350,000 people evacuated in 8 hours because the Coast Guard rallied everybody. So a challenge to Deloitte is to help us figure out how we're going to do that. So we'll talk about it at the break. Anyway, thank you all for coming. And again, we'll be back here at 4 o'clock.